Victor Kilian survived Hollywood's blacklist and decades of obscurity. He was later found brutally murdered in his modest apartment in 1979. The official story dismissed his death as a robbery gone wrong, but new forensic evidence reveals a truth far darker and far more disturbing than anyone expected. What really ended the life of Hollywood's forgotten everyman? The answer changes everything you thought you knew about injustice in the shadows of fame. Victor Kilian's face was everywhere in Hollywood's golden age, even if his name rarely appeared above the title. Audiences first glimpsed him in silent films, then as the steady, weathered presence in more than 100 features, The Adventures of Captain Marvel, The Oxbow Incident, and dozens more. He played judges, farmers, preachers, villains, always the reliable everyman, the kind of actor who could slip into any scene and make it feel real. But for all those years on screen, Kilian never found lasting security. In 1950, that vanished overnight. The Red Scare swept through Hollywood like wildfire. The House Un-American Activities Committee, armed with lists and accusations, called in actors, writers, and directors for televised interrogations. Kilian's name landed in the infamous Red Channel's pamphlet, a blacklist that functioned as a professional death sentence. Studio bosses did not require a trial or conviction, just the suggestion of leftist sympathies was enough. Kilian's history of attending union meetings and progressive rallies, once seen as civic engagement, became grounds for suspicion. Transcripts from HUAC labeled him a hostile witness. He refused to name names, invoking his rights and losing his livelihood in the process. Film roles disappeared. His name was scrubbed from credits, his presence erased from studio payrolls. For more than a decade, Kilian survived by returning to the stage, working in regional theaters and Broadway tours. Sometimes blacklisted actors performed under slightly altered names or let their billing slip off the program entirely. Surviving playbills and actors' equity records show Kilian in productions like Look Homeward Angel and Gideon, but the paper trail is faint. Aliases were rarely recorded, a necessary precaution in an era when even a rumor could end a career. The blacklist was not just a professional exile, it was a personal one. Kilian's circle shrank. Friends drifted away, afraid of guilt by association. Union support helped some, but the industry's silence was louder. For a man who had been everywhere and nowhere in American film, the blacklist rendered him invisible in a new, more punishing way. Decades later, when tragedy struck, that erasure would echo in the way his story was handled by both Hollywood and the authorities. By the late 1970s, Victor Kilian had managed something few blacklisted actors ever did, a quiet comeback on television. He became a familiar presence on the sets of All in the Family and Mary Hartman, playing parts that brought a flicker of recognition back to a face audiences had never really forgotten. Kilian's apartment at the Lido, a faded building on Franklin Avenue, became his sanctuary. Neighbors described him as gentle and polite, always willing to lend a hand or share a story about old Hollywood. Despite years of professional exile, he kept his routine simple: morning walks, errands at local shops, and the occasional drink at a neighborhood bar. On March 10, 1979, Kilian was seen returning home in the evening, carrying groceries and exchanging a few words with a building regular. The next day, on March 11, 1979, a friend grew concerned when Kilian did not answer repeated calls or knocks. By early evening, that friend entered the apartment and found Kilian's body face down, the room in disarray. Police arrived soon after. Official reports documented signs of forced entry, a splintered door frame, a broken cash drawer, and personal cash missing. The scene was chaotic, but strangely impersonal. There were no fingerprints, no clear trail of the intruder's movements, and no witnesses from the building reported hearing a struggle. Statements from those living nearby painted an inconsistent picture. Some remembered Kilian mentioning unfamiliar faces in the halls, while others insisted he seemed untroubled in his final days. A few rumors circulated about him being seen with an unknown companion at a bar, but nothing solid ever surfaced. The coroner's report listed blunt force trauma as the cause of death, consistent with a single, brutal attack. The LAPD's initial assessment pointed to a robbery gone wrong, but even that explanation felt thin. The cash drawer was emptied, yet other valuables remained untouched. For neighbors and friends, the shock was immediate and raw. Kilian had survived Hollywood's cruelties, only to be struck down in his own home, in a building filled with people who thought of him as harmless and kind. The sense of loss was sharpened by confusion and by the unsettling realization that even in death, Victor Kilian was left without answers or justice. LAPD detectives briefed reporters just hours after Victor Kilian's body was found, describing the crime as a robbery gone wrong. Their official statement, released on March 12, 1979, cited forced entry and missing cash as evidence, but the details left much to interpretation. The announcement landed in the morning papers and set the tone for everything that followed. Within days, whispers began circulating up and down Franklin Avenue. Some pointed to the striking resemblance between Kilian's murder and the killing of Charles Wagenheim 5 days earlier. Wagenheim, another aging actor, had been found beaten in his own apartment. The scene eerily similar: forced entry, a ransacked room, and no clear suspect. Both men had recently appeared on the same television show, fueling talk of a serial predator targeting elderly performers. Tabloids seized on the connection. Headlines speculated about a Hollywood stalker, while columnists dredged up old blacklist grudges and political vendettas. Letters poured into editors at the Los Angeles Times and Variety, some from Kilian's former colleagues. One letter, published in late March, warned that Hollywood's history of political retribution hadn't faded with the blacklist era. Others insisted the real threat came from organized caretaker scams, criminal rings exploiting elderly actors for their pension checks, a theory that gained traction after Wagenheim's killer was revealed to be a caregiver. Despite the rumors, police doubled down on their robbery theory. Internal memos, later revealed in cold case files, show that detectives dismissed the idea of a targeted campaign, citing lack of evidence. But the early framing stuck. Friends and advocates accused the LAPD of indifference, arguing that the case was closed in spirit long before the investigation had run its course. With the official story set, speculation flourished: political revenge, caretaker rings, or a random act of violence. Each theory found its believers, and each one deepened the sense that the truth about Victor Kilian's death was slipping further from reach. In 2004, a box of evidence from Victor Kilian's murder was carried into the LAPD cold case unit. Inside were swabs and envelopes, some unopened since 1979. Forensic analysts began the painstaking process of extracting DNA, something that had been impossible at the time of the original investigation. The promise was clear: modern science might finally put a name to the violence that ended Kilian's life. Lab reports document the first breakthrough. A partial DNA profile surfaced from one of the old swabs, enough to trigger a match in the state database. The result pointed to a transient with a history of assaults in Hollywood's retirement district. Yet optimism faded almost immediately. The chain of custody log revealed gaps, missing signatures, blank transfer dates, and at least one crucial exhibit, swab number 17, nowhere to be found. The evidence had not been handled with the rigor demanded by modern courts. Even the confession, reportedly given by the transient during a stint in county jail, was not properly recorded. No audio, no signed transcript, just an investigator's summary in a case file. The confession carried little weight on paper. The district attorney's office reviewed the findings. Their letter of declination cited insufficient admissible evidence. Without a solid chain of custody, the DNA match could be challenged in court. Without a recorded confession, the suspect's words meant little. The case once again slipped into silence. For the detectives who had hoped for closure, the frustration was palpable. Decades of waiting, a glimmer of resolution, and then the door slammed shut, not by conspiracy, but by the slow erosion of paperwork and memory. The mystery remained suspended between scientific progress and institutional neglect. Today, Los Angeles remains home to thousands of aging performers, many still vulnerable, many still ignored. The mistakes that erased Victor Kilian's justice aren't history. They're a warning. When bureaucracy buries the truth, silence echoes louder than memory. Some stories fade, but their lessons demand to be heard. In 1968, one of Hollywood's most respected actors and a fierce political voice was found dead, naked, bound, and scrawled with symbols inside his own apartment. Police called it a sordid accident, but for decades the details never added up. Missing valuables, a ransacked room, and evidence hidden away. Now the truth behind Albert Dekker's fate finally comes to light, and what really happened could rewrite the darkest chapter in Hollywood history. So why did a man who defied the system become its most disturbing casualty? Albert Dekker's name once carried weight across Broadway and Hollywood. By the late 1930s, he had already earned a place among the most versatile actors of his generation. Critics praised his performance as the brilliant but doomed scientist in Dr. Cyclops, a film that remains a cult favorite for its eerie color and Dekker's magnetic presence. In The Killers, released in 1946, Dekker played the heavy opposite Burt Lancaster, delivering a performance that the New York Times called icy and unforgettable. He moved seamlessly from villain to statesman, appearing in Kiss Me Deadly as a corrupt doctor wrapped in the paranoia of Cold War America. Each role added another layer to his reputation, a man who could command the screen as easily as he did the stage. Dekker's range was more than technical skill. He brought a restless intelligence to every character, whether as a calculating mastermind or a flawed hero. Colleagues described him as uncompromising in his craft, refusing to settle for easy roles or studio typecasting. His career stretched from the footlights of Broadway to the sound stages of Los Angeles, with newspaper reviews and fan letters testifying to his ability to captivate audiences in any genre. Even in supporting parts, Dekker's presence was unmistakable. His voice, his height, and the sharpness of his gaze set him apart. By the 1950s, he was not just another face in the crowd. He was the actor directors called when they needed someone who could bring gravity and unpredictability to a scene. This was a man at the height of his powers, respected by peers and feared by rivals. With each new project, Dekker's legend grew, and so did the sense that he was willing to risk everything for the sake of his art. In 1945, Albert Dekker took his seat in the California State Assembly, stepping directly from the soundstage into the political arena. He wasted no time making his position clear, publicly denouncing the House Un-American Activities Committee and its campaign against alleged communist influence in Hollywood. Dekker's speeches, preserved in legislative records, called the blacklist a violation of free speech and basic decency. This was not a safe stance. Studio bosses watched closely, and their publicity departments kept files on every actor who stepped out of line. Internal memos from the era show how studios tracked dissent, flagging Dekker as a potential liability. When he spoke out against HUAC, he was not just risking roles, he was putting his entire career in jeopardy. Hollywood in the late 1940s and 1950s was a place of studio control, where conformity was not just encouraged, it was enforced. The studios controlled not only contracts and casting, but also the public image of their stars. Reputation managers, often called fixers, worked behind the scenes to smooth over scandals or, when necessary, bury them. Confidential memos from publicity departments reveal how stories could be squashed, photos pulled from the wire, and damaging details kept out of the press. But the same machinery that protected the studio's interests could also be turned against anyone seen as a threat. Dekker's refusal to play by the rules made him a target for both political and personal attack. Friends described him as adventurous in private, sometimes secretive, but always principled. In an industry where even a hint of scandal could end a career, his outspokenness and eccentricity set him apart and left him exposed. The apparatus built to manage Hollywood's image was ready to weaponize any weakness, especially when it came to those who challenged the status quo. Geraldine Saunders began to worry when her calls to Albert Dekker went unanswered. Days passed with no response, highly unusual for a man who always kept in touch, especially with escrow closing on a new house looming. On May 5, 1968, her concern became urgent. Saunders arrived at Dekker's Normandy Street apartment, hoping for a simple explanation. The door was locked. No answer from inside. She tried knocking, calling out his name, but silence filled the hallway. With mounting dread, Saunders sought help. Accounts differ on whether it was a locksmith or the building manager who assisted, but official police summaries confirm that entry was forced only after all other options failed. The precise time is not recorded in public files, but witnesses and later interviews place her discovery in the late afternoon. Inside, the apartment was eerily still. Saunders moved quickly from room to room, searching for any sign of Dekker. She found him in the bathroom. The shock was immediate and overwhelming. She later told reporters she fainted at the sight. Police were called without delay. Phone records and police logs from that day, if they exist, have never been made public. The only surviving timeline comes from Saunders' own statements: several days of silence, a locked apartment, and finally, a grim discovery that would haunt her for years. This moment fixed the chronology of the case. Every subsequent investigation, theory, and doubt would hinge on the hours and minutes leading up to Saunders' entry into that apartment. Inside the bathroom, the scene was almost surgical in its brutality. Albert Dekker's body was found kneeling naked in the bathtub, wrists locked behind his back with a pair of steel handcuffs. A thick noose, fashioned from cord, hung loosely around his neck and looped over the shower rod above. His eyes were covered with a scarf. His mouth was stuffed with a rubber ball, secured by a chain pulled tight behind his head. Red lipstick had been used to scrawl obscenities and crude drawings across his chest, his thighs, and his lower back. Words and images so explicit that even seasoned detectives hesitated to describe them in their notes. Some of the writing trailed onto areas of his body he could never have reached alone. 2 hypodermic needles jutted from the crooks of his arms, but toxicology later found no trace of drugs. On the tiled floor, police found only a few scattered personal effects. Dekker's wallet was gone. A camera and a tape recorder, items Geraldine Saunders later insisted had been present just days before, were missing. The cash, over $70,000, set aside for a house purchase, had vanished without a trace. Drawers and cabinets hung open, their contents tossed, as if someone had searched in a hurry. Yet the apartment door showed no signs of forced entry, and the lock was still engaged from the inside. The inventory compiled by police left more questions than answers. Some items visible in early photographs disappeared from the official list. The car left running outside suggested a departure interrupted. What remained in that bathroom was a tableau of humiliation and control, a display that felt both deliberate and deeply personal. Every detail seemed to defy the idea of a simple, solitary accident. Forensic review of the bindings on Albert Dekker's body raises immediate red flags. The handcuffs locked behind his back would have severely limited any ability to maneuver. Yet the knots securing the ankles and the chain pulled tight behind his head required a level of dexterity nearly impossible for one person, especially someone of Dekker's size. A forensic pathologist examining the surviving scene photographs noted that the bruising patterns on his wrists and ankles do not match the typical marks left by self-applied restraints. The angle and tightness of the ligature around his neck, along with the precise placement of the blindfold and gag, suggest a degree of control and coordination that would be extremely difficult to achieve alone. Lipstick markings trailed onto areas of his back and thighs that would have been physically unreachable without assistance. These mechanical inconsistencies challenge the plausibility of a solitary accident, raising the possibility that another party was involved. Attempts to reconstruct what happened inside Dekker's apartment run straight into a wall of missing evidence. Official property logs, if they exist, have never surfaced. No chain of custody forms for the handcuffs, ropes, or hypodermic needles are available in public archives. No chain of custody. Requests for fingerprint analysis reports turn up nothing. Investigators noted only that no prints but Dekker's and Saunders were found, with no supporting lab documentation. No prints. The original autopsy slides and crime scene photographs remain sealed in the Los Angeles County Coroner's archives, out of reach for independent review. Sealed archives. Even the inventory of missing valuables, including the vanished cash and camera equipment, is based on witness recall rather than signed receipts. Witness recall. Without access to these records, any effort to re-examine the case is stymied before it begins. The absence of proper evidence room logs and the continued restriction of physical samples keep the truth locked away, leaving the most basic questions unresolved. Today, unanswered questions still haunt the official record. As Hollywood's walls of silence endure, truth too often becomes collateral damage. Dekker's story reminds us the fight for transparency is ongoing, and the real cost of hidden answers is a legacy rewritten in rumor instead of fact. Before his murder left Hollywood stunned, Sal Mineo was the good kid every studio wanted, an Oscar nominee at 17, idolized beside James Dean and Natalie Wood. But fame faded into scandal, rumors, and isolation. Now buried evidence and new revelations confirm that the Sal Mineo mystery is not as simple or as solved as we have been told. What really destroyed a legend on that quiet February night? Sal Mineo's face was everywhere in 1955. At just 17, he landed the role of John Plato Crawford in Rebel Without a Cause, a performance that would earn him an Academy Award nomination and a place in Hollywood history. The studio publicity machine wasted no time, pairing him in photographs alongside James Dean and Natalie Wood. Those images, the three young stars leaning into each other with easy smiles, became icons almost overnight. To the public, Sal was the gentle soul of the group, the sensitive outsider who gave Rebel its wounded heart. Letters poured in by the thousands from fans who saw themselves in his vulnerability. Magazine covers called him the good kid of the new generation, the one parents hoped their daughters would meet. Studio heads booked him for interviews, parades, and endless photo sessions, building a legend out of his wide-eyed sincerity. Even as he stood in the spotlight, clutching his Oscar nomination at an age when most were still in high school, there was a sense that the world expected more from him. The trio's fame was electric, but behind the scenes the shadow of tragedy lingered. James Dean's fatal car crash just months after Rebel's release, Natalie Wood's later mysterious drowning, and Sal's own fate would turn those early photographs into something haunting. For a moment, though, Sal Mineo was Hollywood's golden rebel, an outsider who had finally found his place, unaware of how quickly that world could turn. By the early 1960s, the roles stopped coming. Hollywood's promises faded as Sal Mineo aged out of the teen rebel image that made him famous. Casting directors saw only Plato, never the actor behind the part. He landed supporting roles in films like Exodus and The Longest Day, but the industry kept him in a box, always the troubled youth, never the leading man. As the decade wore on, scripts dried up. Studios moved on to new faces, and Sal's name slipped further down the call sheets. Away from the cameras, the gossip columns found new material. Rumors about his private life, his relationships, his sexuality filled the spaces left by movie reviews. Tabloids speculated about secret affairs and wild nights, painting a picture that was equal parts curiosity and cruelty. The headlines followed him, sometimes overshadowing his work and making every audition a struggle against prejudice as much as obscurity. By the 1970s, candid photographs captured Sal living in a modest West Hollywood apartment, a world away from the red carpets of his youth. Friends recall him borrowing money to pay bills, rehearsing lines in cramped rooms, and hoping for a comeback on the stage. Letters from this period reveal a mix of anxiety and hope, financial stress balanced by excitement for new creative projects. The bright lights of his early fame had dimmed, replaced by the quiet tension of a man trying to rebuild his life while the world watched and whispered. Just after 8 p.m. on February 12, 1976, Sal Mineo stepped out of the theater where he had been rehearsing for his latest play. He drove back to 8567 Holloway Drive, pulling into the apartment's narrow alleyway carport just before 9 p.m. The alley, tucked behind a low stucco building, was quiet. No movement, just the hum of distant traffic. Mineo parked, grabbed his keys, and crossed toward the side entrance. He was only steps from the door when someone lunged from the shadows. In an instant, a single knife wound pierced his chest. The attack was so swift that neighbors heard only a muffled cry before Mineo collapsed onto the pavement. No wallet. Eyewitnesses later recalled seeing a figure dart away toward a waiting car. But in those first few minutes, the alley remained undisturbed, except for the blood on the concrete and Mineo's body, keys still in hand. The emergency call reached police at 9:03 p.m. According to radio logs, officers arrived within 5 minutes, finding the scene as it had been described, eerily calm, with no sign of a struggle and no wallet on Mineo. The entire window between Sal's arrival and the attack spanned less than 5 minutes. Every detail, the theater call sheet, the radio timestamps, the layout of that alley, would become the backbone of the case. Yet, as the investigation unfolded, this precise sequence would raise more questions than it answered. Detectives began their canvass within hours of the murder, knocking on doors and collecting statements from anyone who might have seen or heard something in the alley that night. Over 50 interviews were logged, but the accounts rarely lined up. Some witnesses described a tall white man with blonde hair fleeing toward a small yellow Toyota, while others remembered only a blur in the darkness. Police artists produced composite sketches based on these early descriptions, each one slightly different, none matching the next. The sketches circulated in the press, fueling public speculation but offering little clarity for investigators. As the search widened, detectives zeroed in on physical evidence. Property logs from the initial scene inventory noted the absence of Mineo's wallet, presumed stolen. But when the case files were reviewed months later, the chain of custody for key items had gaps. The wallet never appeared in evidence, and a blood-stained shirt reportedly collected from the scene was missing from the property room. These lapses raised quiet doubts inside the department, especially as the case grew colder. Officers debated whether the investigation had been compromised by early mistakes or by pressure to find a suspect quickly. By the time the first suspect sketches faded from the headlines, the investigation's foundation was already unstable. Unmatched description, missing evidence, and incomplete logs haunted every attempt to move forward. In the background, the detectives' frustration grew, their notebooks filling with unanswered questions and contradictory leads. Detectives finally scored a big break, nearly 2 years after Sal Mineo's murder. But the trail they followed was anything but clear. A dealership log from O'Connor Lincoln pointed to a yellow Dodge Colt, loaned out the night of the killing. The paperwork listed Lionel Ray Williams as the borrower, a pizza delivery man with a record of petty theft. Police zeroed in, convinced the car linked him to the crime. Yet eyewitnesses had spent months describing a yellow Toyota, not a Dodge. One witness insisted he recognized the make because his brother owned the same model. Still, the prosecution pressed on, arguing the car's color mattered more than the badge on the trunk. Williams' statements only muddied the water. In interviews, he changed his story, sometimes denying he was near Holloway Drive, sometimes admitting he had been in West Hollywood, but claiming he never saw Mineo. Jailhouse informants said Williams confessed, but later recanted or claimed police offered deals for their testimony. The case against him leaned heavily on these shifting stories and the dealership's paperwork, not on physical evidence. No fingerprints, no murder weapon, no stolen wallet ever tied Williams directly to Sal Mineo's last night. The prosecution's case was built on a shaky foundation, ready to be tested by the next round of scrutiny. The autopsy photographs raised questions that never found satisfying answers. The fatal wound, one deep thrust to the chest, cut straight to Sal Mineo's heart, but the angle and depth did not fit the profile of a panicked mugger. Pathologists who reviewed the case years later pointed to a downward trajectory, suggesting a taller attacker or someone with knowledge of anatomy. No defensive wounds appeared on Mineo's hands, and the absence of a struggle left experts uneasy. Internal police memos from the first week focus more on the victim's personal life than on the forensic evidence, hinting at an investigation steered by bias rather than science. Files show officers speculating about motives drawn from tabloid headlines, while property logs quietly note the missing wallet and a vehicle description that never matched the car tied to the accused. Meanwhile, rare photographs from his final rehearsals show Mineo on stage, laughing with castmates, proof that even in his last months he was building something hopeful. The contradictions pile up: a wound that does not match the story, evidence that vanished, and a man whose comeback was cut short. In the end, the case leaves more shadows than closure, and the loss remains painfully human. Today, decades later, doubts still shadow the conviction. New evidence remains locked away. In a world demanding accountability, unsolved truths haunt both history and the present. Justice, once rushed, now lingers unresolved. Some stories refuse closure. They echo in every unanswered question left behind.
In the golden age of Hollywood, where glamour ruled and movie stars shined brightly on the silver screen, there existed a darker underbelly of ruthless ambition, bitter rivalries, and fiery tempers. Behind the dazzling smiles and polished exteriors, some of Hollywood's biggest names made enemies left and right, whether with co-stars, directors, or even their own families. In this video, we'll unravel the stories of the most hated women in old Hollywood, from the ruthless Joan Fontaine to the ambitious Anne Baxter and the scandalous Zsa Zsa Gabor. We'll delve into their notorious feuds, power struggles, and the controversies that left them despised both on and off set. How did Joan Fontaine's lifelong rivalry with Olivia de Havilland spill onto the screen? What sparked the enmity between Anne Baxter and Bette Davis during All About Eve? And why was Zsa Zsa Gabor's name synonymous with scandal? Joan Fontaine. Fontaine's most infamous rivalry was with her sister, Olivia de Havilland. Their feud was legendary, stretching back to childhood and intensifying when both pursued careers in Hollywood. It became an open secret that the two sisters despised each other, and their contentious relationship often played out in public. In 1942, the tension came to a head at the Academy Awards. Fontaine and de Havilland were both nominated for Best Actress, Fontaine for Suspicion, and de Havilland for Hold Back the Dawn. When Fontaine was announced as the winner, she brushed off de Havilland's attempt to congratulate her, leaving her sister humiliated and fuming. De Havilland never forgave Fontaine for this slight, and the sisters barely spoke for decades afterward. The rivalry was so intense that even Joan's autobiography was titled No Bed of Roses, in which she criticized de Havilland for trying to steal her roles and their mother's affection. Fontaine's feud with de Havilland wasn't the only relationship she struggled with. While working on Rebecca, Fontaine found herself at odds with her co-star, Laurence Olivier. Olivier had wanted his then-wife, Vivien Leigh, to be cast in the lead role, but Hitchcock chose Fontaine instead. As a result, Olivier was openly hostile toward Fontaine, frequently belittling her performance and criticizing her acting skills. Fontaine later recalled that Olivier was relentlessly cruel to her throughout the production. Her relationship with Hitchcock was similarly strained. Hitchcock's unconventional method of drawing out her insecurities to heighten her vulnerability on screen left Fontaine feeling manipulated and insecure. She described Hitchcock as ruthless and believed he took pleasure in keeping her on edge during filming. Despite these tensions, Fontaine's performances in Hitchcock's films earned her critical acclaim, firmly establishing her as a leading lady in Hollywood. Fontaine's reputation for being difficult extended to other co-stars as well. On the set of Jane Eyre, she clashed with Orson Welles, whom she described as pompous and intolerable. Her strained relationships with other leading ladies like Vivien Leigh and Ginger Rogers further cemented her image as a prim princess unwilling to share the limelight. Olivia de Havilland. While Joan Fontaine may have been despised by her sister, Olivia de Havilland didn't earn any love from Joan either. Born just 15 months apart, Olivia de Havilland and Joan Fontaine's rivalry permeated Hollywood for nearly a century. In fact, de Havilland once quipped, "Our feud isn't a feud, it's a brawl," setting the tone for her turbulent relationship with her sister. De Havilland is best known for her roles in classics like Gone with the Wind, 1939, where she played the gentle Melanie Hamilton Wilkes, and her double Oscar-winning performances in To Each His Own, 1946, and The Heiress, 1949. Despite her public image as a gracious and composed star, de Havilland was known to be fiercely competitive. Her rivalry with Fontaine reached a boiling point in 1941 when she lost the Best Actress Oscar to her sister. De Havilland was visibly upset when Fontaine won for Suspicion, 1941. 2 years later, she got her revenge by taking home her first Oscar for To Each His Own, 1946. De Havilland further cemented her dominance by winning a second Oscar for The Heiress, 1949. According to biographer Charles Hyam, de Havilland once remarked, "Joan is very bright and sharp and quick-witted, but she's also very self-centered." De Havilland's combative nature wasn't limited to her sister. She famously feuded with Errol Flynn, her co-star in 8 swashbuckling adventures, including The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938, and Captain Blood, 1935. Flynn reportedly made unwanted advances towards de Havilland, calling her a cold fish for rejecting him. He later wrote in his autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, "Livy and I were like the sea and the shore, drifting slowly apart." Her battles weren't only with actors, but also with directors. She often clashed with Michael Curtiz, who directed her in The Adventures of Robin Hood and Dodge City, 1939. Curtiz was notorious for his harsh treatment of actors, and de Havilland was no exception. She once walked off the set in protest of Curtiz's behavior, refusing to return until the studio intervened. One of de Havilland's most significant battles, however, was with Warner Brothers. In 1943, she filed a lawsuit against the studio, challenging the legality of their practice of extending actors' contracts for time spent on suspension. Known as the de Havilland Law, her victory not only won her freedom from her restrictive contract, but also revolutionized the Hollywood studio system, granting actors greater creative control. Gloria Graham. With her trademark sultry voice and alluring smile, Gloria captivated audiences as the femme fatale in films like The Big Heat, 1953, and In a Lonely Place, 1950. But behind the smoldering allure was a troubled actress whose life was riddled with scandals, making her one of old Hollywood's most controversial figures. Graham's off-screen life was often more dramatic than her roles. During the production of In a Lonely Place, her erratic behavior and disdain for her co-star Humphrey Bogart became the talk of the town. Director Nicholas Ray, who was also Graham's husband at the time, caught her in bed with his 13-year-old son, Anthony. The scandal led to their divorce in 1952, and Graham married Anthony Ray 10 years later. This notorious relationship alienated many of Graham's colleagues, including her former husband and director Nicholas Ray. Despite the turmoil, Graham continued to land prominent roles throughout the 1950s. Her performance in The Bad and the Beautiful, 1952, earned her an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, though her win was overshadowed by rumors of her behavior on set. Co-star Lana Turner reportedly refused to work with Graham again, describing her as unprofessional and a manipulative diva. Graham's relationship with directors was just as volatile. On The Big Heat, she clashed with Fritz Lang, who described her as impossible to direct due to her constant demands for script changes. Her behavior became so intolerable that Lang allegedly considered replacing her, but producer Robert Arthur insisted she stay. Despite the tension, Graham delivered one of her most iconic performances as the doomed Moll, Debbie Marsh. Further controversy erupted during the production of Oklahoma, 1955, where Graham played Ado Annie. Co-star Eddie Albert claimed that she was a nightmare to work with, frequently arriving late and demanding special treatment. Her performance was widely criticized, with New York Times critic Bosley Crowther calling her miscast and unconvincing. Miriam Hopkins. She was one of the most successful actresses of the pre-Code era. Miriam Hopkins, known for her roles in films like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 1931, Designed for Living, 1933, and The Story of Temple Drake, 1933. Her beauty and talent made her a sought-after leading lady, but her temperamental nature and fierce competitiveness made her difficult to work with. Hopkins had a notorious reputation for being arrogant and demanding, often clashing with directors and co-stars alike. One of her earliest disputes was with director Ruben Mamoulian on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Mamoulian recalled that Hopkins was volatile and challenging, requiring constant reassurance about her performance. Despite their strained relationship, Hopkins delivered a remarkable performance that solidified her status as a rising star. Her rivalry with Bette Davis remains one of Hollywood's most infamous feuds. It began in 1939 when both actresses were cast in The Old Maid, an adaptation of Edith Wharton's novella. Hopkins was known for her theatrical style, while Davis brought a more naturalistic approach. Their contrasting acting methods led to intense on-set friction, with each actress trying to outdo the other. Davis later admitted to deliberately overacting in scenes with Hopkins to steal the spotlight. The feud escalated in 1943 when they were cast together again in Old Acquaintance. Hopkins insisted on redoing scenes multiple times, much to the frustration of director Vincent Sherman. In one memorable instance, Davis couldn't contain her rage and shook Hopkins violently during a scene, nearly injuring her. Sherman noted, "They hated each other with a vengeance." Hopkins' arrogance also put her at odds with leading men like Frederick March and Herbert Marshall. On Designed for Living, directed by Ernst Lubitsch, Hopkins constantly vied for attention with March and co-star Gary Cooper. Lubitsch found her behavior exasperating, describing her as the most difficult actress he had ever worked with. Hopkins's insecurities often led her to demand script changes and more screen time, much to the dismay of her co-stars. In The Story of Temple Drake, Hopkins played a scandalous role that brought her both acclaim and controversy. Her portrayal of the sexually assaulted Temple was considered too explicit, and the film was banned in several states. Hopkins thrived on the attention, but her risque performance also earned her the ire of conservative critics and audiences. Mae Clarke. Clarke's career was marked by both triumph and turmoil. Best known for her roles in The Public Enemy, 1931, and Frankenstein, 1931, Clarke's rise to stardom was marred by conflicts with co-stars and directors that earned her a reputation as one of Hollywood's most challenging actresses. Her most iconic moment came in The Public Enemy, where James Cagney famously smashed a grapefruit into her face. The scene catapulted Clarke to fame, but behind the scenes, her relationship with Cagney was far from amicable. Cagney later recalled that Clarke was difficult to work with due to her temper and demands for special treatment. Despite this, they went on to star together in another film, Lady Killer, 1933, where tensions again flared. Clarke's fiery personality wasn't limited to Cagney. During the production of Frankenstein, she clashed with director James Whale, refusing to film certain scenes unless changes were made to the script. Boris Karloff, who played the monster, described Clarke as headstrong and stubborn, often disrupting the shooting schedule with her demands. However, her performance as Elizabeth Lavenza was well received, and Frankenstein became one of the most influential horror films of all time. Off-screen, Clarke's relationships with other actresses were equally strained. She reportedly had a contentious rivalry with Anne Dvorak, her co-star in Three Wise Girls, 1932, over billing and screen time. Dvorak once quipped, "May was always ready for a fight, even when no one was interested." Their rivalry was exacerbated when Clarke accused Dvorak of trying to steal her role in the Penguin Pool murder, 1932. Despite her early success, Clark's career began to decline in the mid-1930s. Her uncooperative behavior and penchant for conflict made her unpopular among studio executives. In one notable instance, she clashed with director George Stevens on the set of The Housekeeper's Daughter, 1939, walking off the set after an argument over her lines. Stevens eventually convinced her to return, but the incident solidified her reputation as unreliable. Clark's turbulent personal life also contributed to her fall from grace. Her first marriage to F. Scott Ames ended in divorce after just 2 years, and her second marriage to Stevens Bancroft lasted even less. By the early 1940s, Clark's star had dimmed significantly, and she was relegated to supporting roles and bit parts. Anne Baxter. Anne's portrayal of the ambitious Eve Harrington in All About Eve, 1950, remains one of cinema's most iconic performances. But Baxter's role as the conniving understudy wasn't far removed from her real-life persona, as she garnered a reputation for ambition and manipulation both on and off the screen. Baxter's rise to fame was swift. By 23, she had already won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for her role in The Razor's Edge, 1946. But it was her role in All About Eve that solidified her as a star. Her on-screen rivalry with Bette Davis mirrored their off-screen tension. Davis, who played the aging actress Margot Channing, found Baxter's performance to be too over the top and accused her of trying to upstage her. Davis once quipped, "She should have been called Anne Backstabber instead of Baxter." The tension between the two led to a bitter feud throughout the production. Baxter demanded equal billing with Davis, a move that infuriated Davis and further strained their relationship. Director Joseph L. Mankiewicz had to intervene repeatedly to keep the peace, describing their interactions as volatile and charged with animosity. Baxter's ambition wasn't limited to her rivalry with Davis. She frequently clashed with directors and co-stars. On the set of The Ten Commandments, 1956, she had a tumultuous relationship with director Cecil B. DeMille. Baxter, who played Nefertiti, reportedly demanded numerous script changes to give her character more screen time. DeMille found her demands exasperating, but ultimately acquiesced to some of her requests, believing her presence would enhance the film's commercial appeal. Her co-star Charlton Heston, who played Moses, found her behavior unpredictable and temperamental. Heston noted in his autobiography that Baxter was often difficult to work with and prone to mood swings, which disrupted the production. Baxter's reputation for being manipulative also extended to her personal life. Her marriage to actor John Hodiak ended in divorce in 1953, with Hodiak citing her controlling nature as a primary reason. Her second marriage to Randolph Galt was similarly troubled, with Galt describing Baxter as impossible to live with due to her constant demands and erratic behavior. Jean Tierney. Tierney's troubles began early in her career. Despite her undeniable talent and beauty, she quickly developed a reputation for being challenging to work with. During the production of Laura, director Otto Preminger found her demanding and overly concerned with her appearance. He insisted on multiple takes to achieve the right look, which frustrated Tierney. Despite their clashes, Tierney delivered one of her most iconic performances, solidifying her status as a leading lady. Her relationship with Preminger soured further during the making of Whirlpool, 1949, where Tierney portrayed a kleptomaniac undergoing hypnosis. Preminger described Tierney as difficult and unpredictable, noting that her struggles with depression often affected her performance. Nonetheless, Tierney's nuanced portrayal received critical acclaim, though the tension between her and Preminger ensured they never worked together again. Tierney's behavior also strained her relationships with co-stars. On the set of Leave Her to Heaven, she clashed with Cornel Wilde, whom she reportedly found unprofessional and arrogant. Wilde later described Tierney as moody and distant, often refusing to speak to him between scenes. Despite the tension, Leave Her to Heaven became a major success, earning Tierney an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. Another co-star who felt Tierney's wrath was Dana Andrews, with whom she shared the screen in Laura and the Iron Curtain, 1948. Andrews claimed that Tierney's perfectionism often led to heated arguments on set, describing her as a perfectionist to the point of exhaustion. He later admitted that her mental health struggles may have contributed to her erratic behavior. Tierney's insecurities about her appearance also made her demanding with makeup artists and costume designers. Edith Head, the legendary costume designer, noted that Tierney was obsessed with every little detail of her wardrobe, often demanding last-minute changes. Makeup artist Ben Nye recalled that Tierney would frequently refuse to leave her dressing room until every eyelash was perfectly placed. Tierney's personal life was equally tumultuous. Her first marriage to Oleg Cassini was marked by infidelity and financial woes, ultimately ending in divorce in 1952. Her subsequent relationship with Prince Ali Khan, the ex-husband of Rita Hayworth, was also rocky, with the prince's family reportedly disapproving of Tierney. Paulette Goddard. Goddard's rise to stardom began with her marriage to Charlie Chaplin in the early 1930s. While Chaplin's influence helped launch her career, her talent soon shined through in roles like the Gammon in Modern Times and Hannah in The Great Dictator. However, her marriage to Chaplin was rocky, marked by infidelities and professional rivalries. The two divorced in 1942, and Chaplin later remarked that Goddard was ambitious to a fault. Her role in So Proudly We Hail brought her acclaim, but also conflict. Goddard allegedly sabotaged her co-star Veronica Lake's performance, insisting on script changes that would favor her character. Lake later accused Goddard of conniving to steal scenes and using her charm to manipulate directors. Despite the tension, Goddard received an Academy Award nomination for her performance. Goddard's ambitious nature often put her at odds with her co-stars and directors. On the set of Unconquered, 1947, she clashed with director Cecil B. DeMille over creative control. DeMille wanted her character to appear more vulnerable, while Goddard insisted on portraying a stronger woman. Their arguments became so heated that DeMille reportedly threatened to replace her. Her relationship with co-star Fred MacMurray in Standing Room Only, 1944, was also strained. MacMurray found Goddard controlling and dismissive, claiming she often undermined his suggestions for their scenes. However, Goddard brushed off his criticism, stating, "In this business, you've got to look out for yourself." Susan Hayward. Hayward's early career was marked by determination. Born Editha Mariner, she came to Hollywood from Brooklyn in 1937, vying for the role of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. Although she didn't get the part, she secured a contract with Warner Brothers, eventually moving to Paramount, where she starred in Bo Gesta, 1939, and Reap the Wild Wind, 1942. However, her uncompromising attitude often put her at odds with directors and co-stars. One of her most notorious feuds was with Bette Davis during the production of Where Love Has Gone, 1964. Hayward and Davis clashed over creative control, with each actress demanding top billing and rewrites to enhance their roles. Their rivalry became so intense that director Edward Dmytryk had to shoot their scenes separately to avoid confrontations on set. Davis reportedly called Hayward a pushy, demanding redhead, while Hayward found Davis pretentious and insufferable. Hayward's conflicts weren't limited to Davis. On The Lusty Men, 1952, she had a tumultuous relationship with director Nicholas Ray. Ray described her as uncontrollable and moody, often refusing to take direction and insisting on rewriting her lines. Co-star Robert Mitchum also found her difficult, calling her a temperamental spitfire. Her abrasive personality also surfaced on the set of The Conqueror, 1956, where she starred alongside John Wayne. Wayne and Hayward were both known for their strong personalities, leading to frequent arguments about their scenes. Wayne later remarked that Hayward was like handling dynamite, volatile and unpredictable. Zsa Zsa Gabor. The Hungarian-born socialite and actress, Zsa Zsa was known as much for her lavish lifestyle and glamorous image as for her acting career. While she appeared in films like Moulin Rouge, 1952, and Lily, 1953, her flamboyant personality and penchant for controversy overshadowed her roles, earning her a reputation as one of Hollywood's most notorious divas. In 1989, Gabor was arrested for slapping Beverly Hills police officer Paul Kramer after he pulled her over for a traffic violation. The highly publicized trial ended with Gabor serving 3 days in jail and paying fines and compensation. The incident solidified her image as a temperamental diva, and she made the most of the publicity, quipping, "He deserved it." Gabor's diva behavior extended to her co-stars and directors as well. On the set of Queen of Outer Space, 1958, she clashed with director Edward Burns over her character's costumes, insisting on wearing more glamorous outfits than the role required. Burns later remarked, "Zsa Zsa was always demanding special treatment and refusing to listen to direction." Her feuds weren't limited to directors. Gabor often found herself at odds with fellow actresses, particularly Shelley Winters and Eva Gabor, her own sister. Winters described Gabor as outrageous and selfish, claiming that she would throw tantrums just to get attention. Meanwhile, Zsa Zsa's relationship with Ava was strained by jealousy and competition, leading to frequent arguments both on and off set. In her later years, Gabor became known for her eccentric public appearances and notorious legal battles. She married her ninth husband, Frederick Prince von Anhalt, in 1986, and the two remained together until her death. Their relationship was marked by scandal, with von Anhalt often making outlandish claims about his heritage and adopting adult men to carry on his royal lineage.
The world watched her become a household name as the lovable, wholesome Ellie Mae Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies. But there was so much more to Donna than the iconic character she portrayed. Men adored her not just for her beauty or her on-screen charm, but for qualities that went beyond the surface. From her entrepreneurial ventures to her natural charm, Donna Douglas left a lasting impression on everyone she met. So, why did men, along with countless women, fall in love with her? Let's take a deeper look at the traits that made Donna Douglas not just a star, but an unforgettable icon. She was the girl next door. Donna Douglas had that vibe you just couldn't resist, the kind of charm that made her feel like the girl next door. And by that, I mean she wasn't trying to be anything she wasn't. She was just real. And that made her so easy to like. No fake airs, no pretenses, just pure, genuine goodness. Take her role as Ellie Mae Clampett in The Beverly Hillbillies. Ellie Mae was the embodiment of that down-to-earth charm. She wasn't trying to be fancy or glamorous. She was a fun, sweet character who was always herself. Whether she was chasing after animals or trying to help her family figure out how to deal with their new rich life, Ellie Mae was just there, doing her thing. And it was that natural warmth that made people love her. You didn't need to be someone super fancy to win hearts. Donna showed you could just be yourself and still be adored. What's cool about Donna's charm is that it wasn't forced. It didn't feel like she was putting on a show. Ellie Mae was someone who you could imagine hanging out with, someone you'd want to be friends with, you know? There was this authenticity about Donna that made her so approachable. You didn't have to try to impress people to be loved. Just being kind, genuine, and real was enough. It's the type of charm that's so easy to connect with, especially in a world where so many Hollywood stars were all about that perfect, polished image. Donna wasn't trying to be perfect. She just was who she was, and that was so refreshing. She made you feel like you could be her friend without all the glam and glitter. She didn't need to be someone you couldn't relate to. She was just herself, and that's what made her so special. She had this way of making you feel like you belonged, like she was the kind of person you could sit down with and have a genuine conversation. And let's be real, who doesn't want that in a friend or a star? Donna had this natural ability to make people feel at ease, like she was one of us. She wasn't trying to be a bigger-than-life star. She just let her true, kind nature shine through. And honestly, that's a pretty rare thing in Hollywood. It's the kind of charm that makes you admire someone, not because they're perfect, but because they're so refreshingly real. Her girl-next-door vibe wasn't just a character trait, it was her. That realness made her stand out in a time when a lot of stars were caught up in the whole untouchable vibe. Donna was someone who didn't need to be larger than life to be adored. She showed us that being kind, relatable, and just yourself could make you unforgettable. That's why men and women alike couldn't help but love her. She didn't try too hard. She just let her true self shine. And in a world full of glitz and glam, Donna Douglas was a breath of fresh air. Her contagious energy. Donna Douglas had this energy about her that was just contagious. You know the kind of person who walks into a room and immediately lifts the mood? That was her, even when playing Ellie Mae on the Beverly Hillbillies. She didn't just play the part, she became it. Her character was full of life, always bringing a burst of joy and excitement. And honestly, you couldn't help but feel the same way when you saw her on screen. Her energy wasn't just about being loud or over the top, though. It was this warm, natural enthusiasm that made you smile every time she showed up. It was the kind of vibe that made her character so lovable and approachable. Ellie Mae wasn't just the cute, sweet country girl, she was the embodiment of fun, always enthusiastic and ready for whatever came her way. That positive attitude was impossible not to get swept up in. And it wasn't just Ellie Mae where Donna's energy came through. In real life, she was known for being bubbly and full of life. She was the kind of person who made everything seem a little brighter just by being there. Whether it was chatting with fans, showing up to events, or just being around her co-stars, you could feel that buzz of energy around her. It was effortless, too, not something she had to force. She just had that natural ability to make people feel good. Men and women loved that about her. Who wouldn't want to be around someone who could make any situation feel fun and exciting? Donna's energy wasn't about being the loudest or the most dramatic. It was the kind of vibe that made people feel happy just being near her. It's that kind of positivity and enthusiasm that makes people memorable, and Donna Douglas definitely left an impression with hers. Her infectious energy also gave her an edge. Even when she wasn't the lead in a scene, she had this way of bringing everything to life. Her enthusiasm could light up even the most mundane moments, making her presence impossible to ignore. You were always drawn to her, even if she was just there to support the main action. That ability to stand out in any setting, it's something people admired and loved about her. In a world where it's easy to feel weighed down by the daily grind, Donna's energy was a refreshing reminder that life can be full of joy, excitement, and fun. She made you want to keep up with her and maybe for a moment forget about your own stresses. And that's one of the reasons people just couldn't get enough of her, because her energy was the kind that left you feeling lighter and happier every time she graced the screen. Her elegance was timeless. Donna Douglas had this effortless elegance that made her stand out from the crowd. She wasn't flashy or trying to be over the top. It was a quiet, refined kind of grace that made her unforgettable. Whether she was on or off screen, she had a way of carrying herself that made you think, wow, she's classy. Take her role as Ellie Mae in the Beverly Hillbillies. Even though Ellie was the fun country girl next door, there was still an undeniable elegance in how Donna played her. Whether she was dressed in simple country clothes or playing the role of the naive but adorable hillbilly, there was a certain poise about her that made every moment feel special. She made modest clothing look chic, and her natural beauty shone through without any of the need for heavy makeup or flashy outfits. It was all in the way she carried herself. There was a quiet sophistication about her that felt timeless. In real life, this elegance wasn't something she had to work at. Donna wasn't someone who followed trends or tried to keep up with the latest fads. Instead, she had a classic sense of style that always seemed to fit her perfectly. Whether she was attending an event or just going about her day, her fashion choices were always chic without being overdone. It was this timeless elegance that made her not only beautiful but also incredibly graceful even in her more casual moments. Men loved that about her. There was something deeply attractive about a woman who didn't need to shout for attention. Donna's elegance came from within. It was in her posture, the way she spoke, the way she interacted with others. She didn't need a lot of fanfare to be noticed. She simply exuded grace, and it drew people in. What made Donna's elegance stand out even more was the fact that it wasn't about perfection. She wasn't trying to be some unattainable ideal. Instead, she was comfortable in her own skin. It was this authenticity paired with her graceful nature that gave her a rare kind of beauty, one that didn't fade with time. In a world where trends and looks changed so quickly, Donna's elegance was something that never went out of style. It was a trait that made her beloved by both men and women alike, and one that made her shine in every role she took on. She was genuinely kind. Donna Douglas was the kind of person who made you feel special without even trying. She wasn't just an actress, she was genuinely kind, warm, and down-to-earth. Fans and co-stars alike always spoke about her sweetness and how approachable she was. There was nothing put on about her kindness. It wasn't a part of her image or a calculated move to gain favor. She simply had a good heart, and it came through in everything she did. But this goodness wasn't just something Donna played on screen. It reflected her real personality. She was known for being generous with her time, always taking the time to chat with fans and make them feel seen. It was clear that her kindness wasn't for show, it was just who she was. Her genuine warmth and caring nature extended beyond the set and into her everyday life. Donna was someone who looked out for people, and that was true in her interactions with both her colleagues and the public. She didn't need to be the center of attention. She was content just making those around her feel happy and valued. Whether she was helping a co-star, chatting with a fan, or simply being a kind person in a world that often seemed to reward the opposite, Donna's heart was always in the right place. That kind of kindness is magnetic. It's one of those qualities that makes people want to be around you. And men? They love a woman who is genuinely caring and compassionate. There's something incredibly attractive about someone who makes others feel good about themselves. Donna's genuine kindness wasn't just limited to the people she knew personally. It was something that radiated to everyone she met, and it's one of the reasons she was so adored by so many. Her kindness wasn't just something she showed in small gestures either. She cared about causes and people who needed help, always willing to lend a hand. It's rare to see someone who genuinely gives their time and energy to others without expecting anything in return. That's what made Donna Douglas not only beloved by those who knew her, but respected by all who came across her path. She didn't need to be a diva to be adored. Her kindness did all the work for her. And that, my friends, is a trait that never goes out of style. She was independent. Donna Douglas wasn't just a pretty face or a sweet personality. She was a woman with an unwavering sense of independence. In a time when many actresses were expected to fit a certain mold, she carved her own path. She wasn't afraid to stand up for herself or make her own decisions, and that made her all the more attractive to both men and women alike. Take her decision to pursue a career in acting. At the time, it wasn't the easiest road for a woman to follow, especially for someone like Donna, who came from a small town and didn't have the usual connections that many in Hollywood did. But she was determined. She didn't just wait for an opportunity to come to her, she went after it. And that tenacity eventually led her to the role of Ellie Mae in The Beverly Hillbillies, which became a defining moment in her career. What made Donna's independence even more admirable was the way she stayed true to herself throughout her career. In an industry that often pressured women to conform to certain standards, Donna didn't try to be something she wasn't. She didn't follow trends, and she didn't let anyone tell her who she should be. She was perfectly content with carving out her own niche and doing things on her own terms. That confidence in her own identity was magnetic. It showed that she didn't need validation from anyone else to feel worthy, and her independence didn't stop at her career. Donna wasn't afraid to make bold choices in her personal life, too. She took the time to travel, to explore new interests, and to live her life the way she saw fit. She was never the type to be overly reliant on others or to let circumstances dictate her happiness. Instead, she worked hard to shape her own destiny, which only made her more inspiring. Men and women respect a woman who knows what she wants and doesn't shy away from going after it. Donna's ability to balance her career, personal life, and passions all while remaining true to herself was an admirable quality. It's that fierce independence that set her apart and made her even more intriguing to those who looked up to her. The fact that she didn't let anything or anyone stand in her way was one of the many things that made her so captivating. Her natural beauty. When you think of Donna Douglas, it's impossible not to think of her radiant beauty. But what made Donna stand out wasn't just her classic good looks, it was how effortless and natural she was. She wasn't the typical Hollywood glamour queen, and that was part of her charm. There was something about her beauty that felt real, down to earth, and approachable. She didn't have to put on a show to look beautiful. It was just who she was. Her beauty was part of the character's simplicity and innocence. With her bright smile, flowing blonde hair, and sparkling eyes, Donna embodied the girl-next-door image, but with a touch of elegance. Her natural beauty made her stand out among the Hollywood starlets who often leaned on heavy makeup and glamorized looks. Donna didn't need all of that to shine. She was radiant without all the frills, and it's one of the reasons why she captured so many hearts. But her beauty wasn't just about her looks. It was also about how she carried herself. She had a confidence in her own skin that made her even more stunning. You could tell she was comfortable in who she was, and that kind of self-assurance is magnetic. Whether she was on screen or off, her grace and poise added to her beauty, making her presence unforgettable. In a world where people are constantly trying to fit into unrealistic standards of beauty, Donna's natural approach was refreshing. She didn't rely on heavy makeup or dramatic hairstyles to get attention. Instead, she let her authenticity shine through, and that made her even more beautiful in the eyes of those around her. Men were drawn to her because her beauty wasn't forced. It was effortless, unpretentious, and most of all, real. Her beauty, combined with her easygoing charm, made her someone you could imagine wanting to spend time with, not just because of how she looked, but because of how she made you feel. She made beauty seem like something attainable and relatable, and that's why so many admired her. There was nothing artificial about Donna Douglas. She was as beautiful on the inside as she was on the outside, and that's a rarity in the world of show business. She had strong work ethic. She was also one of the hardest working women in Hollywood. She didn't just show up for work. She gave it her all, every single time. This strong work ethic was evident in everything she did, both on and off screen, and it made her stand out even more in an industry full of stars. In all the roles she played, it wasn't just about looking cute and playing a fun, lovable character. Donna worked tirelessly to make Ellie Mae, for instance, memorable. She dedicated herself to making sure the character felt authentic, bringing warmth, humor, and real emotion to a role that could have easily been played as one-dimensional. And it wasn't just her acting skills that shone through. Donna also learned how to do many of the stunts and physical work her character required, including horseback riding and animal handling. This wasn't just about acting for her. It was about giving the audience the best version of the character she possibly could. But her hard work didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. Donna was incredibly dedicated to her career, always seeking out new opportunities to challenge herself and grow. She didn't just stick with TV, she also appeared in movies and even had a successful career in music, releasing a couple of country albums. It was her versatility and willingness to work hard that allowed her to continue expanding her career throughout the years. And she wasn't just a workhorse in show business. Donna took that same dedication into her personal life. She worked hard to maintain a balance between her career and family life, making sure to stay grounded even as her fame grew. She understood the importance of family and was committed to her personal values, which made her even more relatable to her fans. Men admired Donna for this kind of commitment and drive. She was someone who didn't just sit back and expect success to come to her. She went out and earned it. And she didn't do it for the fame or the recognition. She did it because she truly cared about her craft and wanted to be the best at it. That level of dedication is something people can't help but respect and admire. She was down to earth. Donna Douglas had an infectious, down-to-earth vibe that made everyone feel like they were in the presence of a real, relatable person. She wasn't interested in playing the Hollywood diva or surrounding herself with a fake lifestyle. She was approachable, warm, and completely unpretentious, and that's what made her so lovable. She embodied this grounded, relatable charm. While some of her characters might have lived in a mansion in Beverly Hills, in real life, she was far from a typical spoiled, pampered rich girl. She was sweet, fun-loving, and utterly genuine. And Donna's portrayal of her was the same. She didn't put on airs, she was just Donna, the girl next door who happened to be living out a unique story on TV. Off camera, Donna was known for being just as approachable. Despite the fame that came with the Beverly Hillbillies, she never let it go to her head. She took the time to connect with her fans and had a way of making everyone she met feel important. Her sincerity and lack of ego were refreshing in an industry where fame often comes with a sense of entitlement. Donna never acted like she was above anyone. She simply treated people with kindness and respect. Her down-to-earth nature was also evident in how she lived her life. She had a no-nonsense attitude, and while she enjoyed the perks of fame, she never seemed to get caught up in the chaos that often surrounds it. She knew how to keep things real and maintained a strong sense of who she was, even as her popularity grew. It's easy to admire someone who can remain grounded when everything around them is constantly changing. For men, her humble and genuine personality was incredibly attractive. There was nothing intimidating or distant about Donna. She was the kind of woman you could imagine sitting down with, having a real conversation, and just enjoying life without any pretense. And for women? They admired her for the same reason. Donna was a role model for being true to yourself, no matter what the world throws at you. She didn't need to be anything other than herself to be adored, and that's a rare quality in Hollywood, where so many people are putting on a show. A serial entrepreneur. While many TV stars from her era let their fame define them, Donna wasn't content to rest on her laurels. She understood the power of building something lasting beyond the spotlight, and she made sure to carve out a life that reflected her independence and business acumen. After her iconic role as Ellie Mae Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies, Donna didn't simply fade into the background. Instead, she turned her focus to other ventures, proving that she could thrive in multiple arenas. She wasn't just a former TV star, she was a woman who could get things done. For instance, Donna turned to writing, publishing books like Miss Donna's Cookbook and Donna Douglas, the Girl Who Had Everything. She didn't just write about food or Hollywood. Her books reflected her passion for sharing knowledge and connecting with people. It was clear that Donna had a creative side that extended far beyond acting. But she didn't stop there. Donna also ventured into real estate, proving she wasn't afraid to take on new challenges. In a field that required business savvy and a keen understanding of markets, Donna showed she could navigate the complexities of a competitive industry and still maintain her elegance and charm. Perhaps one of her most surprising yet impressive moves was becoming a financial advisor. In an era where many stars were at the mercy of managers and agents, Donna took control of her financial future, learning the ropes of wealth management and helping others make sound financial decisions. This wasn't just a side hustle for her. It was a full-fledged career, demonstrating her resourcefulness and her commitment to empowering herself and others. From the tragic accident that almost crippled her to being turned into a punching bag by her husband while pregnant, Doris Day has no doubt gone through hell. But on TV screens, she was the perfect girl next door. Little did most of her fans know what was truly going on behind closed doors. We'll get to that. In case you don't know who Doris Day was, you're in for a treat. Doris Day, an icon. Born Doris Mary Ann Kappelhoff on April 3, 1922, she was an American actress and singer who took the industry by storm. Her journey began back in 1939 when she kicked off her career as a big band singer. Fast forward to 1945, and she hit it big with not just one but two chart-topping songs, Sentimental Journey and My Dreams Are Getting Better All the Time, thanks to her collaboration with Les Brown and his band of renown. But Doris wasn't just about the band life, she was ready to fly solo. She ditched Brown and embarked on a solo career that saw her record over 650 songs from 1947 to 1967. Talk about a powerhouse! In the 1950s and 1960s, Doris was one of the leading ladies of Hollywood. Her film career took off with the 1948 flick Romance on the High Seas, and from there she starred in a little bit of everything. Musicals, comedies, dramas, and even thrillers. Remember her as Calamity Jane in Calamity Jane, 1953? Or maybe you caught her in Alfred Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much, 1956, alongside James Stewart. She had some unforgettable on-screen chemistry with Rock Hudson, co-starring in 3 successful comedies, including the classic Pillow Talk, 1959, which even earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. And let's not forget her appearances with the likes of Clark Gable, Cary Grant, James Cagney, and Frank Sinatra. She truly shared the screen with some of the biggest names in Hollywood. But she didn't just stop at movies. After hanging up her film boots in 1968, just as her star was shining at its brightest, she launched into television with The Doris Day Show, which ran from 1968 to 1973. Doris's talent didn't go unnoticed. She snagged a Golden Globe and the Cecil B. DeMille Award for Lifetime Achievement in Motion Pictures in 1989. Then in 2004, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. No big deal, right? And if that wasn't enough, she also grabbed the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2008 and a Legend Award from the Society of Singers. In 2011, she scored the Los Angeles Film Critics Association's Career Achievement Award, proving she was still in the game. Just when you thought she'd slow down, Doris released her 29th studio album, My Heart, in 2011, which was packed with new material and even hit the UK top 10. By 2020, she was one of only 8 recording artists to have topped the box office in the US 4 times. But now, to the not-so-glamorous parts you may not have known. The accident. On October 14, 1937, Doris Kappelhoff, then a bright-eyed 16-year-old dancer from Cincinnati, found herself in a starkly different world as she lay in a hospital bed at Mercy Hospital. Just hours before, she had been filled with dreams of a dazzling Hollywood future, preparing to take the leap into stardom. That dream now lay in shambles around her, shattered by a terrible car accident that had altered the course of her life. The night before the accident was supposed to be a celebration. Doris, along with her dance partner Jerry Dougherty, had just signed a 5-year contract with an organization that supplied dancers to the movie industry in Hollywood. They were ready to embark on a new adventure, leaving behind the familiar stages of the Netherland Plaza Hotel and the Cincinnati Club, where they had performed countless times. Friends had gathered for a farewell party at the home of Mr. Clarence Holden, offering well wishes and sending them off with dreams of success. Doris and Jerry felt unstoppable, fueled by the excitement of what lay ahead. But as fate would have it, the ride home from the party took a tragic turn. Doris, Jerry, and 2 other friends, Albert Schroeder and Marion Bonekamp, were in the car when it collided with a freight train at 5th and High Streets. The impact was catastrophic. In an instant, the bright future Doris had envisioned was turned upside down. After the crash, Doris was left lying on the parkway, surrounded by debris, her leg injured, and her dreams feeling distant. As paramedics arrived, the reality of her situation set in. "My leg is broken. My leg is broken," she cried out, her voice filled with fear and desperation as she was loaded into the ambulance. She pleaded for her mother, Alma Kappelhoff, who had planned to accompany her to Hollywood, knowing how much this meant to her daughter. In the chaos, Jerry rushed to her side, his concern palpable as he tried to assess the situation. When he realized the extent of her injuries, it broke his heart. For nearly 6 years, they had danced together, preparing for this moment, and now it felt as if everything had come crashing down. Despite the pain and fear, Doris tried to comfort him, assuring him that she would dance again. After the accident, the hospital staff examined Doris's injuries. They confirmed that she had suffered a broken leg, which would require at least 4 months of recovery. The news was a heavy blow to Doris, who had spent countless hours training in ballet and voice, preparing for her moment in the spotlight. She couldn't help but think of how close she was to achieving her dreams, only to be sidelined by this terrible accident. Doris's mother remained by her side, trying to keep her spirits up. She reminded Doris that they would have to wait until spring for their trip to Hollywood, a statement that felt like salt in the wound. Meanwhile, the other passengers, Albert and Marion, sustained various cuts and bruises but were otherwise okay, which was a small comfort in the aftermath of the crash. As days turned into weeks in the hospital, Doris grappled with her injury and the toll it took on her aspirations. While she was stuck in bed, her dreams of dancing faded like the sunlight outside her window. However, instead of letting despair consume her, Doris began to channel her energy into singing. She recognized that while her dancing career was on hold, her voice could still carry her to new heights. During her recovery, she immersed herself in vocal training, honing her talent and finding solace in music. This decision would ultimately set the stage for a remarkable transformation in her career. Just a few months later, bandleader Les Brown heard Doris's voice and recognized her extraordinary talent. He offered her a chance to sing with his band, which opened the door to her first major hit, Sentimental Journey. From that point on, Doris Day became a household name, charming audiences with her voice and her infectious smile, all the while carrying the lessons learned from that harrowing night. The accident may have altered her path, but it didn't define her. Instead, it shaped her into the iconic figure she would become, showing the world that the show must go on, no matter the obstacles. She was a fake girl next door. Doris Day was the epitome of the girl next door in Hollywood, a bright, cheerful figure who seemed to embody innocence and charm. But let's be real, that persona was a carefully crafted image, a product of what studio executives and publicists wanted to sell to the American public. Behind all that sunshine and sweetness, Doris's life was filled with struggles that didn't quite fit the wholesome package she was expected to deliver. When Doris first hit the scene in the late 1940s, she was marketed like a dream. Films like Romance on the High Seas and Pillow Talk showcased her as the perfect, lovable heroine who always ended up with the guy. And why wouldn't they want to promote that? After World War II, people were craving stories that reaffirmed traditional values, and Doris was just the gal for the job. But here's where it gets interesting. While she was playing these roles, her real life was anything but picture perfect. Even as her career took off, Doris often found herself forced into roles that didn't resonate with her true self. After her split from Jordan, she wanted to branch out and try more serious parts, but Hollywood wasn't having it. Instead, they pushed her back into those light-hearted romantic comedies, reinforcing that sweet girl image. It was like a never-ending cycle of play the part, don't rock the boat. As the years went by, Doris started to feel suffocated by the very persona that had made her a star. By the 1960s, she was a household name, but it came with a hefty price tag of public expectations. People wanted her to keep smiling, keep being that innocent, carefree woman, even as her personal life began to unravel. From marriage problems to substance abuse, the real Doris Day was a far cry from what you saw on TV, and the executives knew this and hid this from the world. She was a punching bag. Doris Day was the golden girl of Hollywood. She was often portrayed as a bubbly, cheerful persona that made her an endearing figure on screen. But behind that sunny exterior was a darker reality, one marked by a series of awful and abusive relationships that would leave deep emotional scars. Doris's first marriage to Al Jordan, a big band musician, began with a whirlwind romance that quickly devolved into a nightmare. They married in 1946, and Doris was excited about starting a family. However, as time went on, the shadows of their relationship grew longer. Al, who struggled with his own demons, reportedly became physically violent towards Doris. This was not just limited to emotional manipulation. He was known to have hit her even while she was pregnant with their son Terry. Imagine the fear and helplessness Doris must have felt, carrying a child while facing such violence from someone she had trusted and loved. The abuse took a significant toll on Doris. It was not merely a series of physical assaults. It was an all-encompassing emotional struggle. Doris had to endure feeling trapped in a marriage where love was replaced by fear. But there was also her career to think of. The pressure to maintain her public image as America's sweetheart compounded her pain. After all, how could someone so beloved be experiencing such turmoil? This facade became an overwhelming burden, forcing her to conceal her struggles while putting on a brave face for the world. But soon enough, even Doris took a stand and said, enough is enough. The tipping point came when Doris realized she could no longer endure the abuse. Summoning every ounce of strength, she left Al, taking their son with her. Leaving was a significant and courageous step, but it was also the beginning of a long healing process. Doris had to confront the trauma of her past while also working hard to provide for her son. The emotional scars from the abuse lingered long after she escaped the situation. It would take years of self-discovery, therapy, and self-reflection for her to reclaim her sense of self-worth. The impact of her first marriage didn't just fade away with time. Doris often spoke about how the violence she experienced shaped her views on relationships and love. Even as she found success in her career, the shadow of her past continued to follow her. For years, she struggled with trust and intimacy, fearing that any new relationship might mirror her experiences with Al. But at another attempt at love, Doris faced an equally worse fate: sleeping with the enemy. When Doris married Martin in 1951, she believed she had found a partner who would support and love her unconditionally. Martin was not just her husband. He was also her manager, guiding her career and helping her navigate Hollywood. For many years, it seemed like they were a perfect match. Doris trusted him completely, letting him take the reins on her finances and career decisions. She was focused on her work, pouring herself into singing, acting, and making films. Meanwhile, Martin was handling the business side of things, or so she thought. However, as it turned out, Martin had a darker side that Doris never fully grasped. While she was busy being America's sweetheart, he was allegedly squandering her fortune, which was estimated to be around $20 million at the time. Imagine putting your trust in someone so deeply, only to find out later that they were secretly draining your bank account. It was a betrayal of the highest order. And when Doris learned the truth after Martin's demise in 1968, it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. After Martin passed away, Doris began to dig into their finances, and what she uncovered was nothing short of shocking. Not only had Martin mismanaged her money, but he had also kept her completely in the dark about their financial ruin. There were no warnings, no discussions about budgeting, or even any hints that they were in dire straits. Instead, Doris found herself facing the harsh reality of almost being bankrupt. The man she had trusted most had not only betrayed her financially but also emotionally, leaving her feeling lost and alone. To add insult to injury, Martin had taken it a step further by secretly signing her up for a television series, The Doris Day Show, without her knowledge or consent. He knew that this would be a major project for her, but rather than discussing it with her, he just went ahead and made the decision on his own. Her own husband had run you into the ground financially, but he also made major career moves without consulting her. It must have been infuriating for Doris, who had built her career through hard work and determination. Eventually, Doris had to pick up the pieces of her shattered financial situation, and it wasn't easy. She found herself navigating bankruptcy and financial recovery at a time when she was also grappling with the emotional fallout from Martin's betrayal. It was a real wake-up call for her, forcing her to take control of her life in a way she never had to before. She had always relied on Martin to handle the business side, but now she needed to become her own advocate and financial manager. Despite the challenges, Doris faced this new chapter with resilience. She stepped into her role on The Doris Day Show, using it as an opportunity to rebuild her career and regain her financial footing. This series became a significant part of her life, allowing her to showcase her talent to a new generation while also helping to restore her wealth. Slowly but surely, she began to claw her way back from the brink of financial disaster. Looking back, Doris often reflected on her experiences with Martin. She learned the hard way that trust, while essential in relationships, should also be accompanied by awareness and oversight. It was a painful lesson, but it ultimately shaped her into a stronger and more independent woman. She would go on to advocate for animal rights and focus on her passions, turning the page on a tumultuous chapter in her life. She was lonely. Doris Day's life really shows that fame doesn't always come with happiness. Sure, she was the charming girl next door that everyone loved, lighting up the screen and belting out catchy tunes. But behind that bright smile, she often felt more alone than you'd think. It's a real twist, because the more popular she got, the more isolated she felt. Imagine being adored by millions but still feeling lonely at night. As Doris's star began to shine in the 50s and 60s, the pressure to maintain that perfect image only grew. People saw her as this bubbly, carefree icon, but underneath she was battling feelings of isolation. While other celebs might have thrived at glamorous parties, Doris longed for something deeper, real connections with people who got her, not just her public persona. She was in this weird position where everyone loved her, but the fame made it hard to find genuine friendships. The conversations she had often felt like they were skimming the surface, and she craved those heart-to-heart talks that could really make you feel connected. The glitzy world of Hollywood sometimes felt more like a bubble that kept her from forming true bonds. Plus, being under the media's microscope didn't help. Every little thing she did was scrutinized, and her personal life became the topic of gossip. It's like she was on a stage, but the audience only saw a performance, not the person behind the curtain. The very fame that brought her adoration also made it difficult for her to share her real self. She wanted to connect with others, but she was always worried about how people would judge her. Her romantic life added to that loneliness. Her first marriage to Al Jordan was pretty rocky, and her third husband, Martin Melcher, turned out to be a huge disappointment when it came to trusting him with her finances. Those experiences left her feeling scarred and hesitant to open up to new people. She really wanted companionship, but her past made it hard for her to trust anyone. In her quieter moments, Doris reflected on her life and couldn't shake off the sadness. She'd often say that, even with all her success, she felt a void inside. Sure, she had the fame, the fan mail, and the accolades, but none of that could replace the comfort of true companionship. At times, she just wanted someone to share her life with, someone real to lean on in a world that felt so fake. But sadly, she never had that. So she poured herself into her music and acting, maybe hoping that by sharing her feelings, she could connect with others on a deeper level. Songs like Que Sera Sera really hit home, not just for her fans, but for her too. Through her performances, she sought to bridge the gap between the dazzling Doris everyone saw and the lonely woman she felt like inside. The tragic demise. Doris Day's life took a heartbreaking turn when her son, Terry Melcher, passed away. Terry was born in 1942 during her tumultuous first marriage to Al Jordan. As a child, he was surrounded by all Hollywood had to offer, and Doris was fiercely protective of him. She worked hard to give him a stable upbringing, especially considering the chaos she faced in her own life. Terry grew up to become a talented music producer and songwriter, working with some of the biggest names in the industry, like the Byrds and Paul McCartney. He had his own share of success and seemed to be carving out a unique identity in the music world, separate from his mother's enormous shadow. Doris was incredibly proud of him and often spoke about how talented he was, which must have brought her immense joy given the struggles she faced in her relationships. However, the dark clouds of tragedy loomed over their family. In 2004, Terry was diagnosed with skin cancer, and Doris watched helplessly as her beloved son battled the disease. It was a devastating blow for her, as she had already endured so much heartache throughout her life, including abusive relationships and the pressure of fame. Terry fought hard, but the cancer took its toll, and he passed away in November 2004 at the age of 62. The loss of her son was like a devastating earthquake in Doris's life, shaking her to the core. She was deeply affected by his passing, feeling an emptiness that words could hardly describe. Doris often reflected on her relationship with Terry, emphasizing how close they were and how they leaned on each other throughout their lives. After losing him, she poured her grief into her work and her love for animals, dedicating her energy to animal rights activism. It was as if she sought to channel her pain into something positive, honoring Terry's memory by continuing to make the world a better place.